Hey everybody, welcome to another amazing episode of Soul Chat. I am your host, Ebony Tutora, and I am so excited to have you here today for another episode. If you are new to Soul Chat, this is the conversation that goes deeper than the surface. If you are new to my voice, I am Ebony Tutora, a life and spiritual coach dedicated to holistic methods of self-love, soul healing, and sound healing. I have a profound passion for sharing the wisdom that I've acquired throughout my life's journey to empower others to discover their most authentic self. So, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, then welcome to the podcast. Welcome back if you are not a newbie here. And before I continue, I just have to give a big shout out to all the men that listen over on YouTube. I was pleasantly surprised. I've never had more than 50% of my audience be men. And I was excited to see that over in the YouTube University. So today's a really special episode. This is something that's been talked about in the headlines and maybe something that you've come across recently. It's been something that our health experts have been talking about for at least probably before 2020, but 2020 really highlighted this specific thing, and it is the loneliness epidemic. So I'm going to read a few things for you all because I find this topic so interesting. Number one, as someone who typically did desire to spend time alone, I would say probably up until the past 4 years that I became extremely interested in like being out in community and doing things. And I know that sounds crazy because for those of you that know me, I've put on so many different community events. And while I was building community and community events, a lot of the time that I spent, for the most part, was alone. Especially on the healing journey, I've just learned that sometimes isolation is actually a sign of trauma. But we're gonna bring that back later in the podcast. So again, welcome. According to the Harvard Graduate School on Education, they have an article called "What is Causing Our Epidemic of Loneliness and How Can We Fix It?" So as of I want to say 2023, our Surgeon General Vivek Murthy had placed a spotlight on the loneliness epidemic. He declared it last year, saying that it's more than just a bad feeling, and it represents a major public health risk for both individuals and society. Murphy also pointed out that although many people grew lonelier during the COVID-19 pandemic, about half of American adults had already reported experiences of loneliness even before the outbreak. So they've been underlying some of the underlying causes, and in May they conducted a national survey with company YouGov to find out what Americans had to say about the problem, as well as the problems and solutions that they supported. So here are some of the findings that they found. 21% of adults in the survey reported that they had serious feelings of loneliness. So the ages were between 30 to 44. They said they were 29%, that they were frequently or always lonely. 18 to 29, the rate was about 24%. 45 to 64, that was lower to 20%. And age 65 and older reported the lowest rate, which was 10%. So there were no real gender differences found, and men and women experienced similar rates of loneliness, nor were there major differences based on political ideology or race or ethnicity. However, adults with more than one racial identity had much higher levels of loneliness, which contributed to about 40 to 42%. Then they go on to talk about income and education. So they describe loneliness as a subjective, distressing experience that results from perceived isolation or inadequate, meaningful connections, where inadequate refers to the discrepancy or unmet need between an individual's preferred and actual experience. And I'm so excited for, these podcasts lead to the next podcast, which lead to the next podcast. And I am so excited about the next podcast as well, because it really taps into how we can, get into survival mode and how we default sometimes to survival mode and how it's like genetically built in. So there are some few touch points, ooh, excuse camera, that I will touch on later, and I'll circle back to another CNBC article where our Surgeon General was actually speaking with Oprah. So some of you may have seen the Oprah snippet floating around the internet. And what they talk about, actually, I will bring that up now. What they talk about is that a lot of us have confidants, but we have contacts, but we don't have confidants, right? So we don't have people where we can explore deeper meaning relationships with. Now, for myself, I don't find that to be true because I am an authentic being. And I think maybe that's why I've gravitated more towards loneliness over the years, because I think it's been taking our generation quite a while to find their levels of authenticity and the levels of who they are. I've seen quite a bit of celebrities kind of talk about how they prefer to not connect with people because people just want to connect just to have access to what you have access to. And I can absolutely relate to that. I have friends who can relate to that, where people just want to be next to them because of what they have and not for who they are. And that can make you really not want to connect with people. Or you're hesitant because you're not really sure who's really for you. I do want to share 2 points that I thought about when having this conversation. So the first one was what I talked about was authenticity. How can you build confidence if you don't even know who you are? Like, how can you attract the people that are your people if you don't know who you are? Like, I feel like that's almost impossible, right? And I do think, let me know in the comments, like, do you know who you are? I think this is a tough question to ask. Maybe it's a tough question to answer publicly, but do you know who you are, right? Do you know who you are without working? Do you know who you are without status? Do you know who you are without money? Do you know who you are without race? Do you know who you are without bringing up your past history, right? We can all talk about where we've been, but do you know who you are, right? Do you have core values that you operate with, right? And I think a lot of us are really navigating that. We're navigating understanding we're not our past. We are not what has happened to us, right? Because it's so easy to be an adult who lives on the crutch of their past. That's probably one of the easiest things to do. And there has been a rise in the victim culture where we can get very attached to our past. We can get very attached to what has happened. We can get very attached to it, mainly because it also lives deeply in our body. So I think authenticity was one of the first things that came to mind for me. Is like, well, how can people create connection and deep connection if they don't even know who they are, right? And putting down those shields. And this is why I've always loved hosting group experiences, because you realize we are not alone. As much as we love to paint the picture that we are singular in our experiences, and I've been through this and I've been through that, you are not alone. You are not, out of the billions of people on the planet, you are not the only one that's been through what you've been through. And I think that's a shield that many people need to put down, because that's what I believe creates loneliness, is thinking you are singular in your experiences. I always say this, that's one of the greatest, biggest lies we even tell ourselves, right? Is that when we go through things, and I think this leads to my second point, which is trauma. I think we isolate because of that same exact reason, is that you think you are singular in your experience. You think that the craziness that you're experiencing, whatever that craziness looks like, is singular to you, and that you are the only one who's experienced trauma on this planet. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It actually is endearing to be in community and to hear likeness, not to trauma bond, right? We don't, please don't get into community to trauma bond, to talk about the trauma, but you do need to be able to talk about it in a way to be able to release it, to let it go, to transform. But I think trauma is a really big reason why we tend to isolate, right? And we're going to isolate, and in isolation, you're going to feel lonely, right? A lot of times it feels very vulnerable to be open about our experiences because of the people who have heard our experiences and used it against us. And a lot of times it's family, it's close loved ones. And I'm always here to remind people, you have been born into a family. But you have a soul family. You have a family that is sent here that knew you before you got here. And I know it sounds like a far-fetched idea, but how many times have you met someone and you feel like, I feel like I know you, right? You just click with them because we have soul families and we get so caught up on our own families and the traumas that we've experienced from close friends, from close family, from lovers, that we don't open up, right? Or we stop opening up. We really close ourselves off. And I know you can think of people like that. You can think of, even yourself, you can think of family members who are extremely closed off, right? And that is because of trauma. Trauma makes us want to close our hearts, close our minds, stop thinking creatively, stop thinking with love, right? And it's unfortunate, right? That's why healing is so essential. So essential. If you don't know the three principles that I heavily rely on, not only for my own journey, but those that I teach to others, it is inner child healing, mindset mastery, and mindfulness. If you could sit with yourself every day and ask yourself, is it one of these three things that's taking a hold of me, or is it all of them? Right? It's going to be one of them. And a lot of us, I already said this, live in the inner child. A lot of us can be adults, and just because you pay bills, you have children, you run companies, this does not mean that you are operating in your highest level of adulthood, of spiritual maturity, right? Of wisdom. That's for another day to talk about that in our generation, and really just being in a generation of lacking wisdom, because wisdom is the foundation of peace and ease and understanding. But those are the two things I thought about when I thought about, well, why are people lonely? Well, it's authenticity. If you don't know who you are, how are you going to attract your people? And you might still be so bent out of shape from trauma that you're crying over the people that have left your life. You're crying over the people where it didn't work. You're crying over your mother or your father not being who you think they should have been. And as a spirit having a human experience, just like you, I'm here to tell you that is old news, honey. That is old news, and there are ways to navigate that. I've shared tons of podcasts on these topics, healing the mother wound, healing the father wound, because at the end of the day, loneliness it's a very crippling feeling. At times I can feel that. Luckily, I have a lot of confidants. I have a lot of people that I can confide in and share my deepest, darkest secrets with, and share the authenticity of who I be. And that really does open the door to getting rid of that feeling. So I think it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible feeling to feel lonely, because it couldn't be further from the truth, especially when we are surrounded by each other. Like, it's not like we all live on individual islands, maybe in our minds, but I remember living in New York City. And even then, at that time, as a young person, I remembered I am surrounded by so many people and I feel so lonely, because in New York City, it was challenging to meet people that just wanted to connect, that wanted to have deep conversation. I'm talking about, you know, 18 years ago, where me talking about spirituality and God and the universe, like, people would tell me I was so weird, right? And again, that leads to trauma, where you isolate, you shut down, you stop connecting with people because you're like, okay, well, if I'm weird, then I don't need to speak to people because there's not a lot of people that understand me. So I want you to really get that out of your mind, because if we talk about those three things that I talked about, inner child healing, mindset, mindfulness, that's like a mindset thing, right? Get out of your mind that the belief that I am the only one experiencing what I'm experiencing. I am the only one that has experienced what I've experienced. No, ma'am, no, sir. You are not. You are not. And it is not to devalue what you've been through, but it's to remind you to connect, find your community, keep becoming who you are so that you can attract your community, right? And I think I've given some amazing tips in some previous episodes, some of the most recent episodes of networking differently and getting out of our comfort zone. And these are things I'm telling you that I've done, right? And I continue to do. And even when I feel like I'm in this little bubble, I know that I have to shift it up. Something that that also came up as well was I remember being surrounded by people who didn't have friends. Now, I have always had some great friends. I have my sister friend, who we've been friends since we were 4 years old. And we've navigated all kind of different times together. We've always been very candid with being open and honest and vulnerable, open to correction, right, from each other and suggestions. But I also remember being surrounded by people that were like, I don't have friends and I don't need friends, right? Like, I got my family and that's fine. Like, my core, my family, like, y'all here, right? And again, that comes from hurt. People who don't have friends, I want you, if you are that person out there, and I don't say any of this with judgment, I say it with like, open your mind, open your third eye. There is nothing to brag about if you are bragging that you have no friends, right? It's your network is your net worth. And this is not like, what are we getting from who we're around, right? Because like, people can take certain things out of context. And it's not about using people or just having so many friends just to say you have so many friends. I'm not even that type of person. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I am a quality over quantity any day of the week. Any day of the week. I'll take a good friend over many friends and just to say I know that person, right? I'm not that person, and people I don't connect with and don't resonate with, I don't hang out with them. I never have. If there are little things that about you that I do not resonate with, I will not find myself around you, right? But I say all this to say, we need to, especially as adults, imagine you have a child who's a kindergartner who says they come home, they're your child, they say, yeah, mommy, I have no friends. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be bragging about that. Not at that age, because children, at the core of who they are, children are so much smarter than adults. They get life. We're supposed to connect and communicate and elevate and have fun and experience joy and life. And sometimes that is through other people, right? Think of the friends that you have those deep belly laughs with, right? Think about the friends who remind you of who you are. And again, I've said this 2 podcasts ago, get you some rich friends, right? And when I say rich, I mean rich in spirit, mind, and body, right? Get you some friends that make you ask better questions and not question yourself, right? But it's important that we are opening our heart to call in um, friends and connections and community. And sometimes this can start out in such a easy way. So I'm going to give you some suggestions here in a little bit, but we make it so complicated, right? And you have to acknowledge with this conversation, probably the best question would be, do I have my guards up? Have I made new friends in the past 4 years, 2 years, 1 year? And I get it. It takes time to build connection. It takes time to get to know people, but it takes effort. Everything takes time, effort, and intention. And I talk about that with healing as well. You can't complain about the things in your life that haven't changed, but you yet haven't given it time, intention, and effort, right? It won't change. Like, why are you expecting something to change that you did not work for? That's craziness, crazy business. Okay. So the US Surgeon General, let's go back to him. He gives some suggestions, because there was something I shared years ago. I think it was even 2020 that I had came across, and it said loneliness was more detrimental than tobacco use, obesity, and addiction, right? So that is to say, like, it's so detrimental to who we are, is to feel isolated, right? So what's the solution? So on a podcast with Oprah, he talks about there's a lot of forces that are telling us that the way to feel emptiness is to focus more on ourselves, and to acquire more, to achieve more. And this is something I've been sharing with some of my clients where I share that sometimes self-love is very selfish, and self-love has some phases that are natural. And one of those phases is a level of selfishness where you just want to focus on you, right? Even as a parent, right? And it can be very selfish and very one-sided because you almost awaken to all the love you have not given yourself, all the attention you've not given yourself. And it's almost like you got a bone to pick a little bit. You got a chip on your shoulder. You're like, okay, now that I realize I have not been loving myself, all y'all could go, right? You all can go, you all can whatever, right? And we have to get more into balance with that, right? We have to get more into balance of loving ourselves and creating the boundaries and loving other people, right? And incorporating them into our self-love strategy. So that's just a sidebar because y'all know I'm heavy on self-love, heavy on the self-love. And I'm heavy on having been through those stages and phases as well, where I was extremely selfish and I had a chip on my shoulder because I had realized, dang, girl, you have not been loving yourself. You have not been caring for yourself. You have not been thinking about yourself. And sometimes the shift is so polar opposite that it's like, I'm going to think about myself all the time now. Right. And obviously, as a mother, I wasn't that daggone selfish. However, I can reflect back and see certain decisions that were maybe slightly one sided. Right. And we have to even approach those decisions with discernment and understanding and grace and forgiveness. So he believes that decreasing the feeling of loneliness actually depends on three factors, none of which have to do with ourselves. And that first thing is relationships. Talked about that. Service and community. I think something that uh, Oprah had said was you have to find someone or have conversations with people who are not doing as good as you. And while I do agree with that, um, I do want to note that it is interesting that your group, your group of people that were 65 and older did not experience as much loneliness. And I think that because their generation understood connectedness, their generation understood community. You know, when I've been going to do my workouts at the YMCA, I see groups of older people. They all know each other's names. You know, they're all interested in what each other has going on very authentically. You know, and I think we live in an era where, you know, if the conversations go something like this: Hey, how are you? What's your name? Oh, my name's Ebony. Oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, how many kids do you have? It's very just like I'm filling out a form, and not like, how you doing? Oh, okay. What do you like to eat? What's your favorite food? You know, have you ever been to this restaurant? Right? We live in a community, and I say community, a society where people are very much, well, who do you know? Right? Where have you been? How much money do you make? Right? There's all this separation. And it is true. We can live our lives thinking, well, I just have to strive. I just have to strive for more. And I think that saying it's lonely at the top, that's where that comes from because it's not lonely at the top. What I like to say is the right people at the top. We want to always be programming our mind for the right concepts so that we can continuously live in a space of love, right? Because who wants to have it all and know people to share it with? Right? Know people to enjoy it with, right? So I think we have to consider all of these different things. I want to leave you with some suggestions of things that I've thought about, things that I'm considering in the next year or so to even implement in my own life. And um, truly embrace. I mean, I always create community. You all being a part of my podcast community it's a blessing and it's an honor to be able to reach so many people just by hitting record. It's a blessing to connect with you all in my DMs and the shares and the comments on posts. That's a way of connecting with community, but it's almost a false sense of community, right? It's really different when you get to see someone and sit with someone and really get to know who they are in and out. And I do think we do need to do that with discernment and as well as an open heart. And this is why I'll go back to this again. I'm going to leave it here. Healing is so essential because healing is it's like tuning your radio station to the right station, right? So that you can feel your way through life. You can feel when people are being dishonest. You can feel when people don't have integrity. You can feel when something doesn't align. You don't question it. You just move on, right? You just move on. So, some community suggestions that I would love to leave you with. Start at home. Start at home. Like we can go out in the world and we can build with the world, but start with community at home. Start with what does that look like in my home and in my home life, whether that's just what you do with your children, with your family, how you connect with your family. I've been more adamant about calling my grandparents a few times a week, not once a month, right? Or once every few months, but actually reaching out to them and saying, hey, how you doing? What you doing today? Right? Start at home. The second thing is elderly care facilities. Now, I'm not sure if some of the policies have changed since 2020, but I do know that I have in my lifetime gone to some elderly care facilities and just visited people, visited, said hi, talked to them. A lot of times these are people who don't have family or have family, but that family doesn't really care to check up on them or connect with them. And I think it's a beautiful way to like help someone transition to the next realm, is to let them know there are humans on this planet that do care. There are programs like Big Brother, Big Sister, facilities like um, children's homes and youth organizations that need volunteers to come in and to connect. Look for communities in your area, look for communities that are outside your area. Stop being so afraid to get in your car if you have a car and drive somewhere else and meet new people. Soup kitchens, right? And one of the things that I remember doing as a young person was speaking a lot to people in the homeless community. They would come up to me and say, hey, you got $1 when I was in New York? And I'd be like, no, but I got time. You wanna talk to me? And I wanted to talk to them because I wanted to know, how did you get to where you're at? What decisions did you make? And I think that we live in such an era of separation, whether it's due to self-love and you're on a high horse, or it's due to a lack of connection and isolating because you feel that you've been hurt, and we have to really process all of that with forgiveness and with grace and simply honor that the way forward is community and the way forward is building mindful relationships, and that it's not just about us. And it's not like, you don't, it's just like new year, new me goals. You don't have to like go to the gym 7 days a week, right? You can start 1 day a week. You can start 2 days a week. So with these goals, you can start making connections once a month, right? Or with the community starting at home, right? The community you have, the friends you have. Hey, let's read a book together, right? Like, and if you don't have friends that want to go deep with you, you don't have friends. Because this human journey is literally all about going deep. This human journey is literally about not only that, because we do want friends we can have fun with. And like, I want friends I could do all that with. Like, we can go deep, we can get a little ratchet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to do all of that with you. And again, that goes back to my main point, my first point, which was authenticity. If you don't know who you are, then begin with removing what you're not. Who do you really want to be in 10 years? Who do you want to be when you're 65? What do you want to look back on and say, wow, like, I'm so happy I changed that about me? Because the last thing I will say is if you're out there, and I've said this already, bragging that you do not have friends, that is not something to brag about. Because it shows that you lack the ability to connect. You will lack the ability to connect deeply with other people. And that's a you thing, friend. That's a trauma thing. And trauma is not the way forward. Trauma just feeds on more trauma. And I know healing can feel very foreign, but we do have to move away from just connecting with people just to like just to do social media posts and just to post we've been somewhere, we hung out with someone, or we went and had a drink. You know what I mean? It's like we need to really be connecting with people, and it shows a depth of who you are. And I shared this in the last podcast. Prayer works. So pray for those friends, pray for those connections, pray to elevate from loneliness to connectedness, because it really does change who we are and how we feel in this world. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for my friends that I can lean into and lean on and share things with, and recognize that even as a boss queen, even as a leader in my realm, even as a strong person, that I can be weak too. And I can have moments too. And they have moments too. And we are here for each other. So, as always, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please leave your comments below on Apple. Make sure you leave a review. Let me know how I'm doing. If this topic is one that hits, leave a comment. Leave a comment about how you're experiencing it. Comments are not just for me or the algorithm, but they're for other people to be able to connect and to not feel alone. We have to stop practicing silence. We have to stop practicing shyness, right? All of that is a form of our trauma responses. So use your voice. Even though you're not speaking, it is still flexing that throat chakra, that worthiness of your opinion of what you have happening. And now that I know my men are watching me over on YouTube, men, release the shame, right? Release the shame of the emotions that you have, right? The more you can name that thing, it's almost like being the brave one to step forward and say, yeah, I feel lonely sometimes, right? I said I do. Right? So thank you so much for listening. I love and look forward to seeing those comments and seeing how this resonates. And I'm really excited to get into the next podcast where I will be sharing with you a book that I have been reading called The Way of the Conscious Creator. You cannot get this book anywhere but from the author, who he graciously sent me this book. And I tell you what, every 3 pages I read, I'm like crying or ahaing, and it's just really a beautiful thing. And it really leans also into this topic and how we get here and feeling lonely and disconnected and all the things. And my goal is to keep helping people be more authentic and connect with their best selves, their best lives, and to live in a way where you can heal and thrive, because that's what we're here to do. So once again, my name is Ebony Tutora. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I look forward to seeing all of your comments. I look forward to hearing how this podcast episode resonated with you. And I am personally so grateful. I'm so grateful, like I said, to be able to have a platform where I can share, where I can connect, and share my voice. It's a beautiful thing. We're still very new into 2020. 2020. Did I really just say that, friends? We're still new into 2025. So don't feel like you have to rush this journey, that you have to rush your growth. Never doubt the power. Never doubt the power of small steps. Small steps every day, because they really do. They really do matter. They really do mean something. And you matter. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.